of the center at the Hasbrook Library, and then I'll share our current service model with you so that we can spend the vast majority of the rest of our presentation talking about all the things we learned from the last 2 years that the center has been in existence. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Matt.
So yeah, I just want to give a little bit of a background into what the CDS is and sort of what we were designed to be and sort of what has come together over the last few years. We opened in the the fall of 2013 with sort of a soft launch at the beginning of the semester and then an actual formal launch a few months later. Any further back, the planning of it is something that neither Julia and I are particularly qualified to talk about because we are both part of sort of an expansion of people working in the center. The idea was basically to, like a lot of digital scholarship centers, to simply take some of these services that are required by a lot of different departments but don't necessarily have a perfect home in any one department. So things like text mining, where it can cross over between lots of different humanities fields, business, things like that. Or GIS, so map making and spatial analysis, that in a lot of cases is held in the geography department but might not be worth much for a student or a faculty member in ecology to go over to geography. And since we don't have a geography department, there really wasn't a natural home for these kinds of skills. So the idea was to bring them into the library so that it was a kind of impartial location for students and faculty to consult with experts in different fields and in different techniques, and then begin to incorporate that into the research. Just up front, it'll come up a few other times, I just want to stress that we wanted to make very, very sure and have continued to make very, very sure that we are never working on any sort of cost recovery basis. We will never, ever, never have, and hopefully never will, hand a bill to anyone for the services that we offer. That's not to say that we don't occasionally say we can't do that. That does happen pretty regularly. But we fortunately have enough partnerships on campuses, or on campus, to be able to hand them off to some sort of cost recovery research unit. So throughout the first year, we were really kind of based off of who we had in place, the services that we were able to offer. So we'd initially sort of expected that we would have a big push for data management planning. I don't want to spoil later slides, but it'll turn out that we really didn't. So I was actually hired as a postdoctoral fellow to do data curation in sciences and social sciences. Fortunately, I came in with a lot of GIS skills as well, and that actually is the one that took up probably 95% of my time. So from my title was kind of spoiled that a little bit as well. I imagine that I didn't get hired on as a data management planning librarian. I got hired on as a GIS librarian. So really what we wanted to do in the first year was to make sure that we weren't stepping on any toes for other research units on campus. We have a Center for Research Computing that does a lot of these things, similar things on a cost recovery, grant-funded basis. We have a few other places that we just wanted to make sure we were building relationships instead of duplicating or competing for services. We did that both from just sort of going out and meeting with these people and really talking it over, which a lot of it happened during the planning stages as well. But then we also had a lot of events that we tried to do with varying degrees of success. In some cases, we would have, close down the center and have every staff member in there available for an open house for a particular college and have 2 people show up in the last 15 minutes. Which was great because it meant we all got free cookies for about the next week. But wasn't particularly good for actually getting our services out there. Other ones were very, very successful. We had lots and lots of people come in and be interested in things happening. And after that first year of kind of figuring out what was needed is when we were really able to begin to kind of bring in some new technologies to assist, to help with particular tasks, and to bring in some new staff from sort of student staffing. So a lot of the things that we began to do was to open up some production facilities. It was not something we really planned much on from the beginning, but there was a lot of interest in both a one-button studio, so a studio that you walk into, plug in a USB drive, hit a button, and you're recording. Julia will present a little bit on that. And a sound studio as well, which we were able to put in place actually in our building, or in our center. We also began to hire undergraduates instead of just graduate students. It's something we will mention a little bit later on as well. It's just simply that finding qualified students and having something for them to do is something we have struggled with a little bit. And bringing in undergrads that can be, in some ways, a little bit more keen to learn things than your jaded graduate student can be a helpful way to overcome some of that. And then we began to actually do some different pedagogical approaches. So we begin to offer some credit-bearing classes, which has worked out really, really well, and then offer some informal workshops, both in text analysis and GIS. And last year we got, or this year, sometime in this last calendar year, we got a grant from our Office of Digital Learning to transfer a lot of our workshop and educational material to sort of a MOOC-lite sort of online modules that they can follow along with. And then throughout the next couple of years, really the idea has been to hire on some new staff, some new permanent staff, and some new postdoctoral staff to expand some of these services. So I was put in place as the GIS librarian. We also hired a formal DH librarian to sit in the center and work on mostly text and coding, but a few other things as well. And then we have 2 temporary clear postdocs in place as well. One focused on visual resources, one focused just on data management and data curation in sciences and social sciences. He basically has my old job. And then we brought in a few other new technologies as well. We've gotten less uptake in 3D printing than we'd expected, but we had quite a bit of interest in 3D scanning. So we got a second better 3D scanner in place, and a few other sort of walk-up 3D printers. So that's really kind of the status of where we have been. I guess I've already talked a little bit about some of our current services, but I'm just going to go back over a few of them in some more detail. Right, this is the next section. So the big things that we work on, our GIS is probably among one of our bigger use cases. And I'm not saying that just because that's what I do and I want to sound important. We also do a lot of text mining. That's probably the secondary one. A lot of just general data use. Someone will come in with a big pile of data and want to know how to answer a particular question. We do data management planning, though again it's not really a very huge percentage of what we do. And then we're sort of related to our digitization and metadata services unit as well. So we serve as kind of the front-facing part of that and the front-facing part of our institutional repository. So we work a lot with people in sort of a translating between the tech folks and the researchers sort of place as well, which actually works really well because most of us come from a more traditional academic background and have some sort of techie skills as well. So we're kind of fluent in both forms of both dialects of nerd, I guess. The other kind of main thing is this referral services, where we do send people off to other campus units, and in some cases off-campus units as well. Apparently Google Slides is functioning quite slowly today. Yep. So a lot of the technology that we have obviously changes pretty rapidly. The things that we started out with may not be the things that we really ended up keeping around. So, that's no problem. It's just I've managed to fluster myself in the last 30 seconds. So a lot of the stuff that we have available is either through appointments or walk-ins. I'd say it's probably evenly split between whether people just sort of wander in and ask us a question or whether they send us an email in advance. We have a lot of workshops that we give as well. Those have kind of gone down a little bit in popularity because if anyone's been to Hesburgh Libraries recently, we're having a fairly massive renovation. So a nice quiet workshop can be interrupted by jackhammering concrete and cutting holes in the floor. So it's not something we've done quite as much in the last year as we had before we had this problem going on. And then we do offer a couple of credit-bearing courses. At the moment, we don't have like an official prefix for our courses, so these are usually unaffiliated College of Arts and Letters or College of Science classes, which again is something that we want to work on in the future because, especially for particular majors, it's worthless for them. If it's something like an engineer that has a very rigorous number of credits that have to go into particular things, having this sort of elective credit is not really quite so worthwhile for them. Do you think we can move on? Okay.
What is data?
Staten is a software package. It's a statistics software package. It's used a lot in social sciences. So our econ librarian, who is affiliated with the center, teaches 1 credit, I think, class just in sort of data analysis using that program, as well as a lot of different workshops and things like that. So, technology's up next, right? So, okay. So I guess this is a case in point for why not using Google Slides is a good idea. Great for collaboration, terrible with the internet. It's not functioning at maximum speed. So we have a lot of different computers in the room. We're not really a computer cluster. We have 8 different PCs and 2 different Macs in place. The PCs, I think we have a picture in here at some point, right? Okay. They're nice sort of dual monitor things. One of them has a giant digitization tablet on it as well, that has 3 monitors and is probably the most used one of all of them, because the ability to have Facebook, Twitter, and your Word document up on 3 different monitors is quite attractive for students. Like I said, we're not designed to be a computer cluster. Originally, and in sort of all of our internal stuff, we call these computers the GIS stations. That's probably about 5% of the amount of actual time used on them is for GIS. We've sort of opened them up to be for whoever wants them at any particular point. We have a lot of other things available for checkout, GPS units of various stripes. We have a couple of GoPro cameras that students can check out, some webcams, some vocal recording techniques, technologies. And then a lot of different sort of maker kits, so Arduinos and Raspberry Pis and a few other things. To date, those really haven't been particularly popular, I think in some cases because we haven't had the resources to put together really good documentation on them. They're easy as far as wiring your own electronics go, which is not particularly easy. So, and then we now have a transcription kit in place as well, so that students and researchers that have sort of recording data can begin to describe it in a little bit more easy of a way. As far as the software goes, it's really just the big things that you would expect from a lot of these different fields that you. Okay. So I'm going to try to remember where my slides are. This is also a good evidence for why you should print out an outline instead of winging it. Our software tends to be sort of all over the place with the big stuff. So the GIS software, we have ArcGIS, we have a lot of the open source alternatives, GRASS, GDAL, QGIS, and a few other things, Envy, stuff that tends to be a little bit more specialized. For stats, we have, again, most of the big ones are SPSS, SATA, SAS is on all of our computers. We also, it didn't get mentioned on the earlier one, we have 10 laptops that are available for checkout as well. Those tend to be relatively well used when it's exam time and stuff like that. And then we now have a lot of analysis and encoding software in place on several of these machines. So things like an XML editor for text encoding and a few different packages for text analysis. Remember what comes after something?
Specialty printing.
Specialty printing. So we do have. We have one 3D printer that is sort of behind the scenes. It's out public, but you can't just walk up and use it. Mainly because keeping it functioning is challenging sometimes. It's a MakerBot Rep 2X, so it's one of the ones that can do 2 different types of filament at the same time. And to keep it working, it is possibly the smelliest, ugliest looking piece of technology in the center, but it works great now that I just pour acetone all over it periodically. We also do a lot large format printing, yeah, it smells great.
Did you get a hood for it, or are you just dealing with the stench?
We just sort of deal with the, I mean, it doesn't reek. Like I'll pour acetone and it'll smell for about 15 seconds and then it dissipates off into the ether.
I've heard the filament reeks too, though, when it's laying down.
No, it's not too
okay.
bad on the maker
Okay.
box. It's an enclosed printer. It's not
Oh,
one
okay,
that
it's not.
the sides are all enclosed and there's a cap on it, a lid on it, basically to keep the heat in there so that it doesn't start curling up. But ways to fix 3D printers is something I have become more of an expert on than I ever expected.
Printers are always evil.
Basically because I dodged the slowest one.
If they
We got
integrate a
3D
stapler into it, we're all doomed.
Yep. We also have large format printing. We do cost recovery on the printing, just because we don't want to be the one place that students come into to print off giant pictures of their cats. We keep it just slightly above what Kinko's would charge so that it's there for ease if someone needs it, but not necessarily for anyone to kind of walk up and use. We do have a large format scanner. We have a 42-inch sheet feed scanner that anyone can walk up and use, though it's a little bit complicated, and we do try to mediate it because if someone sends a staple through, it's going to scratch it up and be kind of expensive. We have we have a high-res auto feed scanner that gets quite a bit of use as well. At our 3D scanner, we have a David that we just got, and we have a Connect-based one that we used for a while beforehand. The Connect-based one would probably be fantastic if someone actually wrote decent software for it. But the David actually works really quite well, even in our sort of limited space where we break it down and put it back together every time someone wants to use it. And then we have the MakerPower Rep 2X, and we have we have one cube in place, and we're planning on getting another. It'll just be sort of self-service. Anyone can walk up and start printing on it. They bring their own filament, and that'll be free as long as they have their filament.
And I did want to mention Sherry Smith is here, and the One Button Studio would not exist without Sherry Smith, so please check it out. We have two reservable spaces in the center. The first is a high-tech classroom that seats 20 to 25 people. There are 5 large monitors for screen sharing, and we've seen a whole bunch of different use cases. So we have quite a few credit-bearing classes that are taught in there, and in fact, we've had one, the extensive reading in Japanese class, that uses it every semester, and she reserves it with me as early as possible, and she just really loves using it because the pods make it so easy for her students to collaborate. And then we, of course, have our workshops in there and meetings, and we are piloting now a collaboration with our math library, where we offer math software tutoring in our classroom space there using our laptops because our laptops have the software on them that they need. And then some student groups have been using the space as well. The Undergraduate Philosophy Journal Club was looking for a space to share the articles that they were reviewing, and they really loved that they could break themselves into small groups and share that information with each other. And at the end of the night, come back together and make some voting decisions there. So every Sunday night during our spring semester, that was what was going on in that classroom, and it was really exciting to see. And then also the graduate student text analysis interest group started meeting in there for the very same purposes. We also have a conference room that seats 12 to 15, and it has a webcam, which only functions as it is supposed to, like 80% of the time. so I wouldn't say that's like a major selling feature of it, but it functions enough that it works for the people who want to use it for things like Skyping. It has a whiteboard wall, and when I say that, I don't mean that it was installed as a whiteboard wall. We put magnetic whiteboard panels up, so that has been really popular, and people use those all the time. And we've seen some really fun use cases in the conference room as well. So this semester, we've seen undergraduates who are just making an app. This is not for a class. This was just something that it's an initiative that they drove themselves, and they like having a space where they can not only meet, but Skype with students at other institutions that they're collaborating with. We also have some undergrads who are working on an international relations course project, and they have to provide consulting services for an existing organization. And so they've been Skyping with partners and help on a regular basis. And then finally, we had a whole spate of graduate students who are teaching sophomore seminars bring their seminar students in to Skype with the authors of the texts that they were teaching. And so they would have these fabulous Q&A sessions, and it was just really exciting to see the conference room get used in that way. And then we have multimedia production spaces as well. So the One Button Studio has been mentioned already, and that was a collaboration between the Hesburgh Libraries, and that was Sherry Smith who really, again, spearheaded that on the Hesburgh Library side, and the Office of Information Technologies, Academic Technologies unit. And so that is a simplified digital video recording space. And the most frequent use cases that we have seen to date include course assignments, presentation practice, and interview recording. But we have seen some students use it to actually produce media that goes out, for example, in the iTunes store, which was really exciting to see. And then also the Sound Studio is a small vocal booth in the space. And initially it was just the booth and a desk and a chair, but we were able to get an iMac and a microphone and a headset for it, as well as a VoIP telephone so that people can host and participate in webinars and do some Skype interviews and podcast recording as well. Last thing we're talking about is partnerships, and then we can get into all the fun mistakes that were made. I just want to make sure I'm correct with that. Well, so, in addition, there are 3 collaborative mobile units in the center. These exist throughout the library as well, and we have some lounge areas and window seating and standing high desks and mobile whiteboards. So I was looking actually at the Schurz Library this morning when I came in early, and much of the same furniture that you have in there as well. We do make both of the spaces reservable by students after hours. So currently, faculty and staff get priority in the classroom and the conference room Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And we went Google, so we all use a Google Calendar. And then I've made the rooms available after 6 p.m. until we close at midnight for students to book using LibCal. And I think you all at IUSB are a LibCal library as well. And then the multimedia spaces are available to everybody using LibCal, which makes things a lot easier. So I really look forward to the day that SpringShare will integrate Google Calendar and their product. Does anyone else in here want that? We could write a letter. Petition at lunch and submit it. The partnerships. So we have quite a few campus partners, and I was really excited when I was working on this slide because way back in the day in our documentation, we had like 3 or 4 campus partners, but our list has grown quite a bit in the last year. So we have been working with the Center for Civil and Human Rights on some projects. The Center for Research Computing has always been a partner, the Center for Social Research as well. The Center for Social Concerns, Matt teaches a credit-bearing class with one of their faculty, and in fact, I think that would be really fun to talk about later. Yeah. And the Center for the Study of Languages and Culture is also a new partner. Keenan Center for Teaching and Learning, the Office of Digital Learning, and then the Academic Technologies folks in our Office of Information Technologies was also a very early partner. And then finally, externally, Matt does a lot of work with the City of South Bend. And of course, we have partners here at IUSB and also the St. Joseph County Public Library. And then events. So we do 2 broad kinds of events. We have center-affiliated or co-sponsored events, like a Day of Digital Humanities, GIS activities, that camp. But then we also do allow people to host events in the center. So for example, the Indiana Black Librarians Network, we had a Wikipedia edit-a-thon, and then also partnering with the QAnon Institute on campus and the Anthropology Department, we were able to co-host a multimedia book launch recently. So that's pretty exciting. And now we can get to the fun stuff.
So we've already sort of talked about this a little bit, just what ends up being popular within the center. And this is our first year of operation, right? Second year, isn't it? Yeah. So this is not 100% current, but the trend is the same in the modern data or the recent data as well. Basically, our two highest areas of inquiry have traditionally been GIS and text analysis. Text analysis initially was mostly text mining. At this point, we're getting quite a lot of text encoding questions because we have an expert in place now. As I already sort of mentioned, it may be idiosyncratic for us, but data management planning is not something that we really get a lot of direct requests for. It does happen if an email goes out saying that we do it, we'll get 3 or 4 DMP requests. It's a service that we offer. But there's lots of other places on campus that take care of it. So I think in most situations we haven't done the majority of it on campus. We do get a lot of digitization requests, some of which we can help with right away, some of which we have to sort of say, well, that might be a little bit bigger than we can do in-house. So you may need to look somewhere else for some of those. Yeah. Our users kind of range everywhere across campus. We have a pretty good use from graduate students are probably our primary, particularly for GIS, is that we tend to just get a lot of grad students coming in. A lot of those are on behalf of faculty members that they've been asked to do some sort of grunt work, and then they need to come and figure out how to do it and get credit for it with their advisor, which we're happy to do. We do get a lot of text mining requests sort of across the board, undergraduates, from departments that might be a little bit of a surprise sometimes as well. We get quite a lot of business undergrads that are interested in text analysis. Digitization is mostly by faculty or professional staff on campus. And then the sort of general operational, can I work in here? What time are you open? Can I rent out this space to meet with my study group? Are overwhelmingly undergraduates, but that really wasn't a huge surprise to us. Our workshop registrations, we started out during the first year. I think I gave an Intro to GIS workshop every 2 weeks just to see what capacity was. And as you might imagine, it sort of fell off. I reached the point where I had hit saturation in our 12,000 roughly students of everyone that wanted to learn about what GIS is. So we dropped down from probably 9 or 10 on average to 2 or 3. We still offer the whole range of workshops, but again, with the renovation, it just hasn't been quite as popular. But what has been quite a bit more popular is doing sort of custom workshop training for particular departments or particular things. So I've done GIS workshops for different departments, political science graduate students, engineering undergrads, sort of targeted at the kinds of research questions that they have in those fields. We've done things like high resolution photography, all sorts of different ones, Adobe Illustrator for scientific analysis. Sure.
The Adobe Illustrator for Scientific Imagery was an example of a referral. So somebody came to us with that question. We don't actually have anyone who can do that in the center. That is something that our emerging technologies librarian, Randall Harrison, does. And so I worked with them to facilitate that for one of the biology labs. It was really fun.
And then we usually do, in the spring, a research and stats sort of boot camp, a 3-day event where students can learn a little bit about all the big software packages for statistical analysis and hopefully figure out how to compare them. So we have learned some serious lessons as far as technology goes as well. The specialty printing and scanning, particularly 3D printing, wasn't as popular as we expected. That's probably because there are, at this point, 3D printers are really cheap. There's a lot of them on campus. As far as I know, we are still the only one that is not affiliated with the department, that anyone can just sort of walk up and hand us something and use or submit it through our website. But I think and that happens maybe 5 to 10 times a semester, we'll get someone just completely random. What happens more often is we function as a backup for when the printer in the engineering department goes down, and then suddenly we get 15 jobs from engineering students that need to print these things for assignments, or the one in the design department is broken for a week or something. So having it open and having it a backup serves a need for the campus that anyone can use it, but it's not something that we're doing every single day. It's something that we're doing maybe once every week or two. We also have, the public library has one with an actually lower cost recovery model than ours, so I think in some cases they've let off some of our use. The specialty workstations that we have, the Mac that was designed to be used for scanning and the PCs that are designed to be using for GIS are not often used for those things, and we're totally fine with that. It doesn't really bother us what they're doing. Occasionally, if there's a credit-bearing class being taught in stats or in GIS, we might have a little note up on the computers. Actually, when you log in, it says you might be asked to leave this machine if somebody has to use it for something. But that's probably only happened maybe a dozen times or so. Yeah, less than that over the course of the last couple of years. But those dual monitor computers that we have are extraordinarily popular, way more popular than the big, like one giant monitor. The students really like having multiple monitors up. So our space gets a whole lot of use. And it helps at the moment that there's not a lot of spaces that are not an active construction site in the library as well. So I think we've seen some pretty big uptake in numbers. The software, the really expensive specialty titles that we got for GIS analysis and things like that, some of them have never been used. And that's often because either there's an open source alternative that the students are using. It's available to do in R, or it's available to do in GRASS or something. Or it just simply, we didn't have we had so many more people that were interested in basic skills that the advanced stuff really wasn't all that important. So we do need to be kind of mindful of what is working and what isn't, and we've started, not renewing some of the more expensive software licenses if we don't need them. It's something we would revisit if we really had a big uptick in people wanting to use it, but it hasn't to date really happened. Do you want
Oh, that's great.
to spaces?
Yeah.
So something that we have observed over time is that we had a lot of furniture in this space that was put in there on an experimental basis to try to get a sense of what people like and what they want, and they like it all. So people, certainly there are areas that are more utilized than others, but truly there are people who use the standing desks constantly, and then there are people who use our little buoy ottomans constantly, and it may only be a few people, but that maybe doesn't mean that we want to ignore them, and that it's important to kind of keep in mind that this variety is something that moving forward we'll probably want to incorporate into a future build out. The standing height furniture has been surprisingly popular, and maybe that's because it's in the media now. I'm not sure. You've probably noticed a lot of articles about how sitting is killing us all, and I feel like every time I see something like that on NPR, there's 3 more people standing in the space, and then people sit for a while, and then I should track that. So that would be really interesting.
Do you want to pursue it? Actually, the one standing desk we have is supposed to be our consultation podium for anyone walking into the space, and from the moment we opened, we had students that just camped out at it, so we got a new desk that's somewhere else. So it's been extremely popular. The entire space will be empty and there'll be 2 students there.
And then event requests are on the rise as awareness of the center increases. So I think the last event that we had, Matt, you had mentioned that people were asking you how to reserve the space for events like this. And so that's something that we're going to have to be really mindful of moving forward, that we need to be kind of strategic about how we receive these kinds of requests and evaluate them and respond to them. And then also the One Button Studio and Sound Studio have been really extraordinarily popular. I think we expected them to be popular, but they're more popular than we expected. And what we are finding is that instructors are increasingly assigning multimedia projects, and not just the instructors that you might expect. So we had one you might expect is some of the business faculty are saying, you have to give a persuasive speech as part of this communications class. But now they are requiring them to videotape a rehearsal in the studio and prove to them that they did a rehearsal, and then they are evaluating it with them and giving them pointers so that they can improve for the actual speech. And then people in our writing and rhetoric program in particular are making assignments as part of the first year of studies program, as well though as some of the language faculty. Not that that's necessarily unexpected, but we've also seen a lot of STEM people use it, and that is kind of the unexpected use case that I was thinking of in particular. The people who are using it from the STEM programs tend to be using it because they're going to conferences and they want to record a class lecture for their absence, or because they want to record a presentation because they can't go to a conference, or because they want to practice for a thesis or presentation like that.
Yeah, with partnerships, I think probably the biggest one that I already kind of alluded to this, that we had to go over and really be careful of was not stepping on toes when it comes to cost recovery units. We actually have the cost recovery, the guy from the Center for Research Computing that does what I do actually sits with us, I think 5 hours a week or something. So that's actually worked out quite well, that I can hand him projects sometimes and he can consult with me on things if he needs to. But it really does, it's something we always have to be quite cognizant of, because I'm basically taking money out of his pocket if I do a long-term, deep project that could be grant funded that he could work with. The way that we've sort of done it is just by having an open conversation about things and talking back and forth. It probably would be good at some point to get a more formal understanding put together, but to date that's worked pretty well for most of the things that we duplicate across campus. I mean, the data management stuff, I think if we if we pushed harder, then it might have become an issue because there are so many places that do it. But because there was so much for me to do that wasn't data management planning, and so much, to be honest, it was a little more interesting to me than data management planning, it didn't really ever become an issue. We also have to be quite careful about credit. Most of our campus partners are very good about giving us credit, and we try to be extremely good about giving them acknowledgement and credit when they've done something on a particular project. But that's not always the case. We have one partner that isn't so good about it. It tends to sort of steal thunder and things like that. And then we have others that sometimes they get left off of things and we get all the credit by accident. So it is really something that we just have to be aware of when any sort of communications are happening about particular projects. Anything to add? Yeah, as far as big things to come and things that we really need to work on, we haven't done everything perfectly. I really don't want it to sound like we've just had the most amazing 2 years and we are the rock stars of developing a Center for Digital Scholarship and everyone should just follow along with what we did. Because we have some things that we can do better. In particular, we haven't really managed awareness of our services super well. Mainly because there's some institutional limitations on what we can sort of do as far as social media goes. And then there's some general things about setting up a center like this that we don't want to have it become a problem. And that's things like use cases and examples of faculty projects that we've worked on. We don't ever want to be in a situation where we're accidentally spoiling someone's research because we've been a consultant on it. So we're just now, after 2 years of being open, getting to the point where the papers are coming out for projects that we've worked on and we can develop a web presence that says, hey, we worked on this, it's a use case, it's sitting on our website. If you have something similar, come and talk to us. We wanted to be really careful early on that we weren't essentially taking something away from an actual researcher. There are communications that can happen to make that a little bit easier, but in most of the big projects that we had, we wanted to make sure that we weren't doing anything like that. We also didn't necessarily do the best job of making use of our grad students and undergrads early on. A lot of us on the research consultant side of things recently come from PhDs. And there's one thing that PhDs tend to be terrible at, and that's delegating, or not just focusing intently on one thing. So handing things out to student employees has been something we've struggled with a little bit. So in a lot of cases, our student employees just sort of sit at the desk, keep the lights on, and hand people adapters when they need them. We could be making much better use of them, and we really have started. We started training up a couple of them to take over 3D printing, which is great. We started handing a few of them some of the cleaning up of digitized data and making things accessible. So it really has become something that we want it to be, so they're developing skills that are going to be useful in their future employment or in their future research. And we're getting there, especially now that we're beginning to develop online modules that we can use the students as test cases for, so they're actually developing the skills while they're sort of making sure that I didn't drop an F-bomb into one of my recorded lectures or something, which to date they haven't found any, so I'm happy about that. But yeah, so I think there's quite a lot more that we can do with the student employees, and a few other things that we could do a little bit better just to market ourselves and have a better web presence. So I think we've sort of reached our point of time as well. 7 minutes. So we did want to leave ample time for questions. I think we've left slightly less ample time than we wanted. But if there are any questions, we would be happy to answer them.
Could you give some examples of the text mining and analysis projects that you've done?
Sure. Do you want to?
Oh, sure. I'll give one. I'll give one. How's that one? Sure. So for example, and this was really exciting because it came from an undergrad. We had a sociology undergraduate senior come to Eric Morgan, and he's the person who does the text mining and analysis for us. And she was curious about what kinds of language was used, what kinds of language were being used in websites related to poverty tourism. And so that's really all I know about the project, other than I heard a lot of great things about the final product being a really great thesis. So it's a really interesting question.
Yeah. Yeah, it's Eric, who does our text mining, is on leave for this year, so think there's been a little bit of out of sight, out of mind. So I've sort of forgotten a lot of the really big examples. I know he worked on a really neat project that was looking at, I don't remember what the South American government was, but it was all the legal documents. It was in a language he didn't speak, and they were working on finding out when these review trials had called something homicide versus murder, or assassination versus murder, to find out the social context of that. Yeah, those are some of the big ones that he's worked on. Again, I wish that Eric was here to actually give you the list of 5,000
And I'm
things.
sorry,
that
I
he's
know
done, but
he's not here and he's been
Yeah.
on leave, but what's the deliverable look like for a project like that?
the deliverable, a lot of times it's a big table of how many times words have been used. It does tend to be, it looks very scientific in the way that the data come out from the programs that he works with. The encoding stuff tends to be a little bit different. The encoding stuff tends to be something that you drop into a website that looks exactly like the printed material is, but has a lot of sort of deep annotation in there as well. And that's the one that we've done a little bit more of lately. I know that they've got all of those, what is Bloomers? Okay, so yeah, this is we should have come with a better list of examples outside of our.
I was completely unfamiliar with the whole thing, so I was just trying to get a better feel for.
Sure. I mean, I guess one of the best examples is, do you remember a few years ago when J.K. Rowling published a book under a pseudonym and they busted her within like 6 hours or something as being her book? They fed all of the Harry Potter books into an algorithm that then tested it against a bunch of other known authors. They already had a suspicion, but they were able to attribute it based on word choice and based on sentence length and things like that. So it's all sorts of different kinds of analysis of the sentiment of what someone's saying, analysis of the number of times they use particular words, and there's tons of theories behind the scenes for what that means and why it might be important.
I think there was a study that they did using text mining to determine that books that use certain very specific words at certain times were more likely to be highly read, like popular books at certain times. So you can do things like that and say like, oh, the words that had the books that had the word war or something occurring in it more times would be more likely to be a bestseller. It's that sort of thing that you can do. You can just look at occurrences of phrases and words and make some sorts of build assumptions.
One more example, not from Notre Dame, but I believe there were some psychologists who had the brains of some nuns who had donated their bodies to science and had their diaries, because apparently nuns are really great diarists, or at least in this order they were. And so what they did was they did all kinds of research on their brains, and they did scans and dissections, and then they used these tools to look at their diaries, and they were able to actually make some associations between things like types of dementia and ways that you could predict it in someone's writing pattern before maybe there was evidence in the medical records.
I had a question too.
Sure.
You said that your data management planning is not really highly utilized, partly because other places on campus offer this. What other places on campus do that kind of work?
Our Center for Research Computing does it. I think is sort of an ingrained part of any project that they're collaborating on. The Center for Social Research, they're actually hiring right now a data management consultant that works with, again, grant-funded projects. We have a local instance of the DMP tool that we built, so there are things happening that we're just not part of. The DMP tool, for anyone that's not familiar, is something out of the University of California system where it basically auto-populates your DMP based on campus resources. So I went in at some point and put in all the things that you could use, our institutional repository, the names of all these things. So it sort of guides you through writing the data management plan for NSF or something like that. It's a fantastic tool. So I think there are some of those that are being used for more simple things. The other thing is I think that we really haven't reached the point in grant-funded research where people really care all that much about their DMP. They're just slapping it together at the end, and we've started in the last year or so having a couple consults that have been because somebody got their grant bounced because of a crappy DMP. But that's just starting. So I think that there's not an ingrained importance to it. in the academic community quite yet for it to be really, really a huge thing. So yeah, I think that those are some of the big issues with where it's happening elsewhere, or if it's just simply not happening much. I mean, when I wrote one before I ever started doing this, I just said, oh, I'll stick it in Dropbox, that'll be enough, right? And sure enough, I got the grant, so. Are we good? Or
Yeah.
Is there any
Any
more
questions? Okay, great.